Good morning, students. Today, our topic is sectors of Indian economy. Now, let us look at these pictures given here on this slide. On this one picture, we can see some agricultural activities happening. On the other side, we can see there is a truckload on the road. And on this third picture, we can see something being manufactured. So you will find that people are engaged in various economic activities. Some of these activities are producing goods, some others are producing services. These activities are happening around us every minute, even as we speak. How do we understand these activities? One way of doing this is to group them, that is, to classify them using some important criteria. These groups are also called sectors. Now let us see how can we classify the sectors of Indian economy. Now this classification of Indian economic sectors can be done on the basis of various activities we do. First of all, it can be done on the basis of ownership, like who owns the sector or the company. What are the working conditions of the workers? In which condition, in which situation they are working? And also the nature of activity being performed. What kind of work, what nature of work they are doing. So on the basis of nature of activity, Indian economy can be classified into primary, secondary, and tertiary activities. And the same economy can be classified on the basis of working conditions as organized and unorganized sectors. Whereas we can also categorize Indian economy on the basis of ownership as public and private sectors. Now let us look at these sectors in detail. What are these primary sector? Primary sector, as in the pictures you can see, people are doing something which is related to the nature. In the first picture, they are doing the agricultural activities. Then there is fishing happening. Then we can see the mining activities. So basically, any economic activity which is centered from extraction of raw materials from Mother Earth. It can be the agriculture, it can be the fishing, mining, forestry, or quarrying. This is known as primary sector. And remember, as we have already discussed, India is the biggest example of this primary sector. However, forestry and fishing can also be cited as the other examples of the sector. So that is why this sector is known as agriculture and related sectors. Okay? So this is primary sector. Then we come to secondary sector. Here in this picture, what you can see is something is being manufactured, isn't it? So when the main activity of any sector is manufacturing something, this is secondary sector. That means converting the raw material from the primary sector into the finished goods, making the such products into usable products which can be consumed by the consumers. This is known as the secondary sectors. Okay, so in the secondary sector of the national economy, natural ingredients are used to create products and services that are consequently used for consumption. And this adds value to the products. You remember this. Okay, so this sector is also known as industrial sector. Then when you come to tertiary sector, now both these sectors, primary and secondary, they need some kind of services in order to get developed. Okay, suppose there is an agricultural activity happening. We have cultivated, we have harvested some crops from the farms. It needs to be sent to the factories. Maybe suppose we take the example of sugarcane. We have harvested sugarcane, but it needs to be sent to the mill, sugar mill. Then what do we need? We need transportation. We need telephone lines to contact to the vendors. So all these telephone lines, truckloads, transportation, this all comes under this tertiary sector. Okay, so basically tertiary sector is also known as service sector because this provides services to the primary and the secondary sector. Okay, so apart from the transportation and communication, it can be the management consultancy, it can be the financial services, can be the IT related services. okay, customer care services. So it all is the part of tertiary sector. Then we will see how this has evolved. Okay, evolution of an economy from primary sector based to tertiary sector based. Initially, when we talk about the early man, when they started developing, developing themselves, doing this agricultural activities. So how they got developed, how this economy got developed, shifted from primary to secondary. During the early civilization, all economic activity was in primary sector. When the food production became surplus, people's need for other products increased. This led to the development of secondary sector. The growth of secondary sector spread its influence during industrial revolution in 19th century. After the growth of economic activity, a support system was the need to facilitate the industrial activity. Certain sectors like transport and finance play an important role in supporting the industrial activity. Moreover, more shops were needed to provide goods in people's neighborhood. So ultimately, other services like the tuition services, the IT services, administrative support developed. So this is how from the primary sector we evolved to the tertiary sector. Next topic is we will see the interdependency of these sectors. How these all sectors, primary, secondary, and tertiary, they are interdependent. How they are connected with each other. We'll take this example of this picture. Now look at this picture very carefully. What can we see here? In the first picture, we can see the sugarcane growing, okay? And we know we have already seen this comes under the primary sector. Then it is being transported, okay? Transported and sent to some other place. So transportation comes under this tertiary sector. Then we can see here being extracted, okay? Sugar being extracted. And then the final product, something we can see. Okay, so here there is an example. To understand this interdependency of all these sectors, we will take the example of a cold drink. In this picture, you can see the finished product is a cold drink. Okay, now a cold drink contains water, sugar, and artificial flavor. Suppose if there is no sugarcane production, then procuring sugar will become difficult and costly for the cold drink manufacturer. Now, to transport sugar cane to sugar mills and sugar to the cold drink plant, it needs services of a transporter. A person or system of persons is required to maintain and monitor all these movements of goods from farm to factory to shop in different locations. That is where the role of administrative staff comes. So now let us go back to the farmer. He also needs fertilizers and seeds, which is processed in some factory and which will be delivered to its doorstep by some means of the transportation. To top it all, at every step of these activities, we require the proper monetary and banking system. So in a nutshell, this describes how interrelated all these sectors of an economy are. So if there is no primary sector here in the sugarcane picture, it will be difficult for the transportation system also to run. And then definitely when there is no raw material, there will be no finished good. If there is no finished good, there is no manufacturing happening. So there will be no requirement of transportation, of the telecom services, banking services, isn't it? So that is how all these sectors are interdependent. Now, how do we count the various goods and services and know the total production in each sector? Sometimes when I was a small child, I used to wonder, how do these governments, they calculate and they count the total production of the country? It must be very difficult because there are so many things happening in the country, so many manufacturing, so many buying and selling. How do they count all these goods and services and all this calculation? It must be very tedious. Okay, and how does this, the GDP and the economy is being counted? How can we measure the economy of any country, whether this country is developing or it is not developing, it is underdeveloped? But now see, The values of goods and services is used rather than adding the actual number to know the total production. Okay, so now we will see a small example for this. How do we count the various goods and services? This is our question. Okay, the value of goods and services is used rather than adding the actual number. Okay, now for example, we'll take an example. If 10,000 kgs of wheat is sold at rupees 8 per kg, the value of wheat is rupees 80,000. The value of 5,000 coconuts at rupees 10 per coconut will be 50,000. Similarly, the value of goods and services in the three sectors are calculated and then added up. Now remember, there is one precaution one has to take. Not every good that is produced and sold needs to be counted. It makes sense only to include the final goods and services. Okay. So take for instance, a farmer who sells wheat to a flour mill for rupees 8 per kg. The mill grinds the wheat and sells the flour to a biscuit company for rupees 10 per kg. The company uses the flour and things such as sugar and add oil to make flour to make 4 packets of biscuits. It sells biscuits to the consumers for rupees 60. That is rupees 15 per packet. So in this case, we will add the value of the biscuit, that is the finished good. Okay. So this is how we count the various goods and services. And this whole counting process is known as the gross domestic product, the GDP. This is one of the important topic for your syllabus. Okay, you have to remember the meaning. Okay, the abbreviation like GDP, it stands for gross domestic product. That means the gross total of the domestic product, whatever is being produced in our country. So here, as it is written, the value of final goods and services produced in each sector during a particular year provides the total production of the sector for that year. Okay, and the sum production in the three sectors give the GDP of the country. So this is how we calculate the GDP. It is the value of all the final goods and services produced within the country during a particular year. And this calculation shows us how big the economy of any country is. Now, thank you so much, everyone. Thank you so much for listening. And in the next session, we will see the other topics